Everybody cross their fingers.
No.
Technology is going to come through for us, right?
Okay, I guess. Oh. We need a clicker. We don't get a clicker? I want a clicker.
So we can just say.
You can do that, or you, when you push the button.
Be there. So if we're saying that.
You want to be in a dark room or a light room?
Yeah.
You have that question?
Can you record that?
I'll try.
Of the B&B project that PAHS is doing right now, started last year. And yeah, go ahead. And for those who don't, I'll give you a little bit of background. The B&B project is a rock art survey on a large ranch in southeast Colorado. This ranch has numerous archaeological and historical and lots of unique rock art. It was nominated as a World Heritage Site, and I couldn't tell you exactly when that was, but that's how unique and how much there is on this ranch. At least 3 times, universities in the past have tried to survey the rock art, but been kicked off by the owner, who is very private. Hence the B&B Rock Art Project, and we're not given the name of the ranch or anything because at the request of the owners. Basically, and we don't want to compromise anything privacy because hopefully this is going to continue. So Anne's going to continue with the what of the project.
We've rehearsed this so many times. Not. Okay. Okay. All right. The project is primarily a survey project. Am I using this right? I have one ear in which I can hear nothing. Okay. All right. Okay. No, you don't have any vermin in your head, do you? I just have to check these things. Come on. We went through COVID. Anyway, that's what it was going after. Well, that's reassuring. Anyway, this project, sponsored, of course, by Pueblo Archaeological and Historical Society, was put together by Doug, Spencer, and myself, with the help, of course, of the private landowners on whose land, of course, as I said, this rock art lives. The intent of what we did was to record about a 1/4 mile of rock art. And as Doug said, some of our archaeological royalty in the region, the general region in which we live, has suggested that this should be or would be representative of something of World Heritage status. That hasn't been done, of course. We haven't even done the survey or completed the survey. Anyway, it's primarily petroglyphs and pictographs, and it is not rock art. I want to make that clear. It's really rock writing, because that's a different way of thinking about what you're going to see. It's a communication source. It's made up of what was done by multiple cultural affiliates, Kiowa, let's see, whatever guy, I've got them by ABC almost, Apache, Arapaho, Comanche, Cheyenne, Ute, and so forth. And so you have, this mash of folk that have been visiting this site for about 2,000 years. The majority of the panels are about 300 to 600 years of age. And back to you, Doug, and I have headlights too.
Yeah.
Which one do you need?
Okay, actually, advance one more, please. Okay, the B&B Rock Art Project is on a, I think we've already said, on a ranch in southern Colorado. Sits on 44,000 pristine acres. Now, the amount of land, the owners have told us a bunch of times and we keep forgetting. It's either 44 or 66,000 acres, but it's huge, huge ranch. And the location, of course, is confidential at the request of the owners. The owners of the ranch stopped surveys at the site at least 3 or 4 times decades ago, and recently allowed our group on the property to survey the site. Now, if you'll hit enter, and there's this is getting started the first day here. Okay, go ahead and advance. Okay, the WHO, of course, PAHS members only are participating in this. And the next few slides are just going to be pictures of some of the participants in the B&B project and what they're doing, the working. One more, okay, project participants. And like I said, we haven't rehearsed it all. So anyway, really cool slide here on the bottom left of a drone picture. And we had to use a drone. We'll get into that. And one more. Oh, and the boss. Yeah.
And the boss.
And the boss. Okay. And that's getting started.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad I only have one slide for this. I didn't realize I had 4. Sorry, folks. Okay. For this project, thank you so much.
There we go.
Okay, to do this project, the first thing we had to do was, of course, to contact the owners and get permission. And this we did. And they were so, I think, generous in allowing us to do this work. We then gathered forms, gathered materials and supplies, survey polls, the like. Most of the folks on this project have done them before for professional archaeologists as volunteers. And I want you to know that 33 of PAHS members have been a part of this. So it has been, I've been really pleased that we had all this talent. Okay, so we gathered together the forms and equipment, and did all the measuring, filled out all the forms that are required by the state for an official record. And then we did the photography. Now the photography started off very slow because we had poor lighting conditions, and we kept trying and kept trying. And the end results, thanks to Wendy and others, were pretty spectacular. But we had to have those photographs because with a project of this size, we knew that we would take the photographs, convert them to drawings. And you can't stop there. You have to go back into the field and meticulously verify every line that you've picked up, plus the other new ones that are inevitable, of course. All right, so okay, I have here defining the panels. I guess that's another slide. Maybe not.
Go ahead and advance it. We've got a little video here.
Okay.
This is the end of the very first day of the reconnaissance.
Okay. In terms of how to break this up, you can't say, okay, we're going to have a panel consistently, or the panel shall be consistently a certain number of meters. You can't do it that way. You have to really look at what is on the walls and see if there is some kind of pattern or theme. And there was. That's been really interesting to me, that almost every panel had a different theme, and it may be kind of subtle. So that's what we're doing here. We've when you see the individual on the left, Ann Stedelman, second person from the left, behind her are about 10 horses. And you can't see anything. But as we came back, we kept seeing more and more of the horses. And Carla and Spencer found, God dang, you can found like 3 or 4 yourself. So it's just remarkable, and it is not very obvious. Okay, so you have contextual concerns, and here these folk are doing some of that work of determining if those drawings are accurate, finding new elements and so forth. The second slide is some of the measurements done in this. And isn't this supposed to be yours, Doug? Okay, keep going if you want. Okay, well, here they are on site and doing more of that job of recording, measuring, describing, and so forth, which would be typical of any recording project. Okay, more of the same and more of the same.
Switch.
Okay. Okay. So glad we were heard.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, Ann kind of touched on this. We had a lot of issues with lighting, and some of the panels we could photograph better in the morning, or or some of them in the afternoon when the sun came around. And if you'll advance, you can see that we're actually using a generator and a light in some of them. Some of the rock art was back in crevices and hard to get light back in there. So we used that. And also too, we used on the right there, a reflector to reflect light onto some of them, or an umbrella to maybe shade them. And anyway, we did have a lot of trouble with light, but we were able to get past that. Wendy is going to do this part. This is de-stretch, which we discovered quite a few pictographs that had never been seen before. So Wendy.
So de-stretch is a computer program that a fellow created that had preset little programs that enhance certain light elements. And so the picture on the left, I was mainly taking a picture, you can see in the very center, of a person on a horse. And then I noticed it seemed like there was some pigment or something below it. So I went ahead and used de-stretch, and it's just a very simple program. And they have like 10 preset buttons that you just click, and it'll enhance certain colors. And red is one of the main pigments used on these panels. And when I clicked on one of those enhancements, then the picture on the right is what appeared. And the red bands going across, those are natural red in the rock. But you can kind of make out the anthropomorphs. There's about 4 or 5 of them, and some look like might be wearing headdresses. So this was just surprise. We had no idea. Then just recently, we'd gone back for another session. I took extra pictures to see if there was more. But then this was another panel. I was not initially looking for paint, but then I saw one figure. It looked like it might have some paint in it. So I found some of my older pictures and ran it through de-stretch. And so you see on the left is a signature, historic signature. And then when I ran through D-stretch, all of a sudden here's this buffalo. No idea the buffalo is there. And then you can make out to the right of the buffalo's head, there is a horse's head. So there's a buffalo and a horse's head there that when you look at the original, when you're even there, there is no sense that would be there. And
Is this the horse head right here?
yes, that's the horse head.
And buffalo is here.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and it is the full horse's body. So they had to go find another picture because that was so this only has a part, the horse's head, because I didn't realize it was there. Well, I didn't frame up the picture to get the full body. So then I had to go find other pictures to find the full horse. And then there's even some more, there is an incised quadruped above the small horse that they shaded in the body of the quadruped. So
Advanced one. Okay, I guess that was all. There's one. This
Oh,
one.
yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah, and that's you can see above on the left, there are the red, it looks like red lines. And those you can see when you're out there at the site. But then when you do D-stretch, it just enhances everything more. So you can really see the details. And then we discovered that some of the bodies of the anthropomorphs have also been shaded in, which is not as obvious when you're just there looking at the panels themselves.
Okay, go ahead and advance. Okay, one of the problems we had was a lot of the rock art was up high. So we had the problem of figuring out how we were going to photograph it. Climbing up to it was, and using a ladder was one way to get to it. Spencer, luckily, had a drone. So we were able to get some of the rock art that was up high with the drone, and we discovered things that had never been seen before. And the reason for that is at one time when they were doing the rock art, it was probably at ground level there, and over time had worn down. And as the area wore down, the rock art got lower and lower there. Go ahead and advance. Okay, and Anne's going to do drawing the rock art.
Okay, when we took the photographs, we knew that that we would have to train folks to know how to do drawings from the photographs. It is so easy to see in a photograph something that looks like it could be a line, but in fact it might be a crack, something like that. Anyway, we had an in-service, and we have two of our people here, Mary and Rod, and thank you folks so much. We had others, yeah. So we've had about 6 artists who have done that work. Advance. Okay, the one on the left, you can see that there are layers. There are superimpositions of these images. And the one here, let's see, I don't know if you can highlight it, is horse armor. Do you see that? Let's see, okay, that's the rider. Now the thing that looks like a trapezoid is the below, or I don't know. Wait a minute. Have you got it? Okay. Wait. This thing would have been buffalo hide. It would have had a collar. And then this is the little horse's head coming out. This would be the rider. So you can see that this is pretty complex because this is over, this superimposes other images made probably other time periods and so forth. the rock is very friable, very easy to erode. Okay, and so we saw a lot of evidence of images done in the past, long before that. This one is a bit more modern, and by that I mean more graffiti. So this one you can see is kind of a hash of graffiti and things that are much older and odd, little odd cupules like the size of a quarter, and perfectly done. We have no idea the meaning of that, and I've never seen that. May we advance? Okay, I guess this is a close up of that last slide that we were talking about. Are there any questions about the, I should wait. Okay, go ahead and advance. Yeah. No, that's okay. Go one more. Una más. Okay, this is that, let's see where it is. Okay, this blue highlights the area of a series of bear paws, bear prints. And this would be a funny or silly little drawing, life size, of someone that was maybe 5'8", to give you an idea of how high up that was. And with the help of Spencer's drone, we found invisible prints here, here, and that's from below. I think that one and one more. And so you can see we're working with things that we can't really touch and look at up close at all. Advance. So that was perfect. Okay, I think that gets this. Yes. Yeah. Ooh.
Okay, as you can see, it's not all work. And here we are relaxing, and the area is just absolutely gorgeous. So not only do we get to does Ann make us work and crack the whip on us, but we get time to relax, hike around and find different things. Like I say, the area is just absolutely beautiful. Go ahead and advance. And these are just some pictures of some of the participants, lunchtime, relaxing, taking it easy. Go ahead and advance one more.
Excuse me, can you go back one? Because this was really something.
Here.
Finding a supervisory archaeologist was fairly tough. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
You can go back one more to show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Go back one more if you would. Okay. Finding an archaeologist whose emphasis is rock art is a toughie. For a number of years, rock art or rock writing was kind of, it was looked down upon because, as someone said, you can't date it. But of course, humans are going to look at these things. They want to know what the meaning of them is. And so I don't care what the pros say, the public really wants to know. And now I think for professionals, they want to know this too. So we found, thanks to Spencer, yay Spencer, Amanda Castaneda. And she's worked with, if any of you know these folk, she's worked with Lair Lohendorf, she's worked with, oh shoot. Well, anyway, a slew of the ones whose names that you're going to see many reports of. So we were delighted to be able to have her. Okay, back to you.
Go ahead and advance. And another one. Okay, again, just relaxing on the right, on top of the bluff, and both pictures. It's on top of the bluff that we were working on. The rock art was down below. There you can see stone circles, probably habitation site up there. Go ahead. Going along with this, there's always adverse conditions. And we had a windstorm, we had a whirlwind that we had all our equipment and tables set up, and a whirlwind hit perfectly, lifted it all up in the air and then dropped it. And we had papers and forms going absolutely everywhere, and we were chasing them around. Of course, flat tires, a windstorm one day that we even had to knock off early, and you can see how bad it was. That picture on the bottom right was taken out of my truck trying to find our way out of there. And if you'll hit the enter, we got a little video here of Dennis and Wendy had a flat tire here right before they crossed the river. And yeah, right. Right. So go ahead and advance one more. Anyway, that's some of the things we ran into, the adverse conditions. And this is pretty much the end here. And I've just got a few slides of the possible next site that we may, hopefully will be surveying. And it's another big long panel with a ton of rock art, unique rock art. Go ahead and one of our members, Jerry Grandel, put the cat in there. So anyway, you never know what you might find. And then until next time. So,
Go back one. Okay, folks.
Here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So you'll get the joke. This is actually a piece, it's an element on a panel. And some say it is a young mountain lion because it has spots. Certainly it's a cat, but Jerry Grandel, one of our artists, using Photoshop, lifted this puppy out and put it right on the main panel. So you never know what you're gonna find. And
what did you feel the questions?
what's it?
Okay, that's it. Yes, that was the Purgatory River. We have a question. How do you want to? Okay, yes.
Repeat the question. So people-
Features on stone can be enhanced by moistening the surface. Did you try moistening the surface on some of those to make them more easy to reveal?
We didn't, and I'm going to let Ann explain why. She's the expert.
I'm hardly an expert. I have done a lot of this, the recording, but I'm not an expert. I'm an avocational like yourself. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll repeat. The question is asked is, did we,
Moisten.
okay, yes. Did we moisten the surface to bring out features? It has been suggested that we avoid doing that because you never know with this very tender surface if you'll cause damage. Other questions? We're not done. You saw what Doug showed in terms of that other very spectacular panel. So if you're interested in this, we welcome you participants. Remember, we've already had 33 of your fellow members, and it would be wonderful if we had 100% of this group. Yes.
Did you find any graffiti from contemporary people, like let's say Calvary soldiers that they have what's their archive?
Yes. Oh, no, sorry. All right. The question was about contemporary graffiti. And, you know, it was very common, of course, for Calvary and so forth to do that on the walls of canyons. Yes, we did not that particular thing, find graffiti from soldiers, but rather individuals in the area. And okay, yeah. All right, yeah. And look at this date. How about that? 1811, incredibly old date. You can see in 1845, I think there. And then this is what was it, a post office or some architect, local architect is, you know, presenting an ad for his skills. Yeah, you know, so that's just what people did. Yeah, but you know what we're doing, or it's not what we are, what Doug is doing. He'll do some reverse archaeology by taking those names that they left, go to public records, talk to the families and say, hey, we are aware that one of your family members may have visited the site, and we're looking for old pictures or old stories about what the site looked like long ago. Can you help us? So that's another strand. If you're interested in that, that's something you can do on computer, never leaving your home. Please let us know. Other questions?
When do you think you're going to do it again?
Okay, we will be done. We shall be done because I'm having my knees done in June. Yeah, so we will be done by May. That's with the help of my buddies, of course, but that would be the goal. And I don't see any reason why we can't make it. So we'll be done with this site, and then we'll need to talk with the owners about further sites. Any other questions? Yes.
What is the ownership of this property secure so these people, you know, don't sell it to Ted Turner or something?
Okay, the question was, is the ownership of this, well, you know, the walls and so forth, secure so that it doesn't just go into any kind of development and so forth? And the easy answer is no, it's not. So what we want to do, and that's the whole point of doing this project, is give these owners the report as to what is at the site. They can then apply for conservation grants and all the other, and then maybe the descendants of this family will find that something that might monetarily be, you know, to their advantage, and for reasons that may not be altruistic, protect it then that way. But until there is a record of what's there, you know, you're not going to get those protections. So that's critical. Thank you for that question. That's really the whole point of what we're doing. Any other questions? Boy, this is an easy job. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are you next? Yeah, we seem to be. You all need to collect them. Need to go explain how it's.
They explain how to. You were.
Teacher Wendy is coming.
Door prize.
Oh, I see.
Now, each table, there's a big table. Each table has one chair that has furniture. Now we're getting a little old.
Better go check.
Um, Good job.
Right. No, I read it immediately. Pictures are more audio. Just. You want somebody else to use buttons?
Can I just stand here?
Yeah, sure. Yep. You use that button or you use this? I use these forward and backwards. Please.
How about that little laser thing you had?
You like that little
once in a
laser
while?
thing? All right, there's the laser.
Well, if you can't find the laser, that's right, because I
I've
can,
got to see what I'm doing.
I
here.
can also just use the
Mouse
general.
doesn't show up.
Oh, it doesn't, oh, it doesn't, okay,
Laser finder. There it is.
yes, thank you.
Hey, but makes it better if you slide it up here.
Yeah.
Whichever.
Thank you.
Piece of cardboard would be fast. Again.
You haven't had a chance to- That's all.
So.
All right, thank you. Okay, so. So the Apishapa phase is kind of a special area that's actually focused in Colorado and in the southeastern part of Colorado. So it occurred around 1050 to 1450 AD. And like I said, it's primarily in southeastern Colorado, but it does extend down into a little bit into New Mexico and Oklahoma. And it arcs all the way up to almost to Colorado Springs, or just south of Colorado Springs. It's believed that the Apishapa peoples are ancestors of the Caddoan-speaking tribes of the plains. The structures are a little more unique than a lot that we often see because they comprise of usually rock circles, but with larger slabs of rock that are more upright. And then there are poles, wooden poles put into in between the slabs of rock. And then the upper part would be these poles and then smaller sticks. And then a mud or a clay would be put around it like a hakal, and then a roof. They also believe that most of these were used as homes and communal structures. And more recently, they believe that most of them, the Apishapa culture was hunter-gatherers, and that they would just rotate through these different structures. And most of their hunting was small game, some buffalo hunting, and then processing of wild plants. And there are very little bit of evidence of actual crops grown. Then also there's lots of petroglyphs or written rock art that are related to a lot of these structures. And some of it is considered contemporaneous or slightly earlier than the Apishapa culture. And the rock art is motifs of quadrupeds, anthropomorphs with the outstretched arms and then really big hands. And then lots of meandering lines and abstract elements. And then this is a map that kind of shows the general area that the Epishapa culture is. So up here at the top, this is right south of Colorado Springs in Fort Carson. So that's a lot of sites are found on the Fort Carson area. And then it goes all the way down to southeastern Colorado, a little bit into New Mexico, and just a tiny bit there in Oklahoma. So these are a couple of the rings, and actually I'm guessing that some of the rock arts or the rock structures that we're seeing at the B&B are probably Epishapa as well. And so a lot of them are just looks like a ring of rocks. And then in some places though, the rock rings are bigger and larger. So whether that was more a communal area or for larger families, don't really know. And some of these rings are also grouped together. So like this one, you can kind of see there's probably like 3 or 4 of these rings grouped together. And then this is some of the rock art associated with those. And these are done on just boulders in the field. And some is very hard to see, very subtle, getting pretty old, probably a little anthropomorph here. And then some just symbols, maybe an anthropomorph or quadruped. And then you have several quadrupeds like running around in a circle on the boulder. Then as you go further, kind of further north, you come to these bigger sites. And this is a site that we've been to, and some of you probably have been, maybe have taken a field trip out there. This is the Kramer site. It is the original site was 2 rooms, one circular is 25 feet across and one that was oval that was 21 by 16 feet. And they now consider that this site is kind of atypical of Epishapa because of its size. They were more Epishapa sites are more like what we saw earlier, just the smaller stone circles. And this is just a close-up of the wall or some of the upright slabs at the Kramer site. And so like this one here, I'm guessing is maybe 2.5 feet tall that are still upright. And so again, that's where they would wedge these poles into between these slabs of rock to start forming the walls. And this is some of the rock art related to that. And most of this is kind of the abstract lines and squiggles. And almost looks like a pelican to me, but who knows? Just further upriver from the Kramer site is some smaller rock structures that are right along the cliff edge that looks down into the river drainage. And another one. So it's just, and this kind of gives you a feel of how they put it right to the edge of the cliff face. And then you can see a few of the panels that are, or slabs are still upright. And this is some of the rock art around that one. This has more of the quadrupeds, possibly, I don't know, shield or atlatl, and some of the abstract lines. And here's one of these figures with the big hands and other enhanced embellishments, and possibly atlatls. But again, it's all kind of conjecture, you know, as to what all these might mean. And maybe a little more contemporary. Here's a fellow with a, looks like maybe a bow. And then as you go further upriver, you come to probably the most spectacular site. And this is on private property. And so this was again with permission that we were allowed to even go get to see this. So we honoring his privacy. A lot of you might recognize it, but I'm just going to show you the pictures. Part of this is just what is now mainly a wall, and it's again right near a cliff edge, and I kind of wonder if it has been enhanced over the years by like sheep herders or just to use as a barrier for keeping the animals either up on top or down below. So this site was originally excavated back in 1949. And so this black and white image at the top is an actual picture from that time that they took, I'm guessing from an airplane, since they didn't have drones back then. And then down below is just a little drawing of the main rooms and structures and where they excavated. And this is the site now. And so you can see it is a very large site, and it's 115 feet by 80 feet wide. And it consists of 2 room clusters. And then there's several outlying, just the simpler rock circles. Just 5 of the rooms were excavated back in 1949. But just in those 5 rooms, they found hundreds of potsherds, projectile points, stone tools, and bone tools, and just a few corn cob fragments. So again, really not a whole lot of evidence that they did any farming. And then you hear, this is the biggest of the structures. And as you can see, these slab rocks are very large. A lot of these are probably about 5 feet tall from the ground up. So I can't help but wonder how much of the rock is underneath, or when it was put down into the ground in order to keep that slab of rock upright. Because these are massive. These have some heft to them. And this is just a kind of reverse view of that same main room cluster. And then it also is kind of right on in cliff edge. And then as you kind of step down, there's this little almost like passageway here, and it's very low. I mean, you'd have to really hunker down, and someone my size really wouldn't fit through there. But it's a natural passageway, and it looks like it connects to a little trail that they could have used to get down to the river bottom. And just more pictures. And some of these pillars were kind of in the center of the circular rooms, and they were used as supports for the roof. And then this is kind of looking just to, I think, the west of the main cluster. This is a smaller room cluster. And so this is just a singular room, a much smaller pedestal in the middle. And it's interesting, some of the rock here is laid down horizontally instead of vertically. And just another view from looking back up to the main room clusters. And then yet another circular room with a pedestal kind of tearing down the hillside. And this is kind of looking up. And then this is a close-up of one of these pedestals that are in the middle of the circles. And you can see that they made a lot of effort to peck out and curve it at the top so that whatever pole or anything they rested in there would be more secure. And then this is just what's remains of one of the circles that's away from the cliffside, just an individual room. And there's still artifacts up there. So while we were there taking the tour, we found a potsherd and projectile point. And then this is some of the rock art that was related to this site. So again, the abstract lines, there's a lot of these rake looking signs as well. Here's another rake. And then very subtly, you can see some quadrupeds around that rake symbol. And then there's the fellow with the big hands. It's interesting, a lot of these anthropomorphs don't have legs. Not sure what that means. And these are just, you find this rock art just on these random boulders as you're walking along. And then of course there is some historic graffiti of people passing through. And then there was, this is really a pretty amazingly good shape still of possibly shaman. And then there's this large rock face, and throughout it all are just kind of sprinkled all over the surface are these individual bits of rock art, from way down here to way up here. And here's a kind of close up of some of those. So here we have the anthropomorphs and possibly a ladder. And then there is right about here, there's a little hand sticking out. And unfortunately, the rest of it is totally obliterated by the lichen. So don't know what's under, but it's under the lichen, the rest of that figure. There's also a lot of the anthropomorphs that have not only the outspread hands, but have lines that draw all the way down towards the ground. And again, some more on that same big wall. And then as you continue on, just on boulders, there's more possible shaman type figure. And again, there's this long line that goes all the way down to the ground. Speculation that this is maybe showing snow falling or possible power lines and energy going up to it. It's there's one article written just back, I think in 2017, that he believes these are all energy lines. So this is just an example. This is the same boulder, but just different lighting. What a huge difference lighting makes in being able to see what is on these boulders. And then across the way from the main site is this island, a land island. And on here, there's about 7 or 8 structures. This has not been recorded before as far as we know, or it hasn't been investigated as much. And so there's mainly some walls along kind of the edges of the island, and and then also some big circles. And because it isn't as frequented, we are still seeing things, artifacts just lying on the ground. So there's choppers, monos, projectile points. And these are some of the original pictures from that main site taken in 1949 when they did the main excavation. So there's one of the lower rooms with the pillar in the middle. There's some of the same rock art. And this is kind of 1949 and basically the same angle from just this past year. So you can see there's some of these rocks almost in the exact same spot. Some of this, it's just truly amazing how it has sustained after all these years. And that is it. So anyone have any questions?
Does it appear as though they have split in order to get those vertical structures? Did they say bisect some of the larger rock, or were these vertical pieces just natural and they drug them and erected those in a fashion to suit their
So the question is, were these rocks that they put up vertically, were they bisected or were they natural? And my guess is they were natural, because that the whole area where the cliff is and what this is on is sometimes bedrock, and it just seems like the sandstone or the type of rock just naturally splits in these flat, long slabs. So I think these are all natural, and they would, find just the right length and size that they would want for putting up the walls.
Could you explain to people, give them maybe a better idea of what how these rocks functioned? I mean, aren't they supposed to be around like the base of wooden pole walls and then past?
Yeah, so that's right. So the function of these rocks were kind of the base of the walls. And so they were, and what's unusual is that there's very few that I'm aware of structures where they put these slabs of rock up vertically. And then I would think they wedged these wooden poles in between these vertical rock, and then used what's called hakal, which is a mud clay mixture. So they have the wooden poles, and then they probably had thinner sticks, branches in between those poles, and maybe even brush to make the upper part of the walls and the roof. I think so, yes. It's kind of like an adobe. Scrub oak and and pinyon, I think. Yeah. Right. So
Anybody speculated about why the need to use the rocks and not just wooden poles?
Well,
maybe couldn't marry them deep enough?
they may have decided to use the rock because there's a whole lot of rock right there to use. And yeah, and that's what the wood around there is primarily, well, this time of year or now is primarily pinyon. So yeah, and pinyon really isn't that big of a tree.
At that location,
Mm-hmm.
more vast than.
And they're pretty substantial. I mean, boy, did they hold up. So, but again, like this site and the Kramer site, they do say is unusual for the size of the rock and the size of the room clusters. That it was more typical just having a simple ring with smaller rocks. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Who's next on the schedule, Mr. Doug? Susan. You need to talk. Introduce. Okay. What's the name of the application?
Okay, folks, next we have Susan Buckles, who's going to do a presentation on Aswan Dam.
You want to drive or want me to drive?
All right, thanks.
Point.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, thank you. All righty. And actually this isn't too much on the Aswan Dam. This is actually going to be a story of my parents, Bill and Nancy Buckles, who lived here in Pueblo, and my father was a professor at the university, and they had the opportunity to actually go to the Sudan in the 1960s and work on the archaeology of the area before the Aswan Dam was built and before the whole area was flooded, because a massive amount of both historical and prehistorical sites were destroyed or buried. And Mr. Ian, I advanced the slide, but not the right slide is showing up.
You break it.
I broke, oh, there we go. I have to, okay, I see. It's showing the next slide. I've got all of this. I've got all this. So these are my parents, Bill and Nancy. My dad was a professor out at the university for 27-ish years, the head of the anthropology department out there. My mom was his sidekick. She never had a formal degree, but she served right alongside my dad for all of his years. She had both official and unofficial roles in all of his different projects. Officially, she cooked for a lot of his projects, sometimes cooking for upwards of 40 people on a Coleman stove. Then she was also lab supervisor, where she analyzed the artifacts, cataloged the artifacts, and then also, she wrote a lab manual that I believe is still in use of today, where she created a template so people could evaluate their artifacts and know what the uses are, the time period they were from, et cetera, et cetera. She also had unofficial roles of camp mom for all the different people, all the different college students that were working on my dad's projects. Mom to my brother, my sister, and me, and confidant, and probably best of all, friend for everybody. So the archaeological survey of the Sudanese Nubia, that was the actual, and actually, let me backtrack for just a second. To come up with this presentation, because I was not alive when my parents went to Africa. I grew up with lots and lots of stories about their time. So what I did to create this presentation, I did some research on the survey of the area, but then I found kind of a treasure trove of letters that my mom wrote right after they returned from the Sudan. And so my presentation is more or less through my mom's eyes. I also, Georgine Booms had slides that most of them were from what my dad took when they were there in the Sudan, but then they also, Carla, she found this last night. One of the head of the whole University of Colorado project, his son was a 13-year-old, and he did a lot of the photography. So I don't know how many of the slides he actually took as well. So at any rate, this is kind of my interpretation. I've learned a whole lot about what actually went on there, but this isn't going to be necessarily archaeological. It's going to be a more personal tour, my mom's tour of their time in the Sudan. So at any rate, this was a massive project. What was happening is that both Egypt and Sudan, they were building what is called the High Aswan Dam. That is this one right here. The Lower Aswan Dam had been built in 1902, I believe, was when it was completed. But they wanted to build a larger dam in order to control the flooding of the Nile River, help with hydroelectrical power, and then just have a lot of irrigation. A lot of that actually was interesting, that I found that it has not proven to improve their agriculture, because the silt that the flooding brought in, the annual flooding of the Nile that brought in, is, well, at the bottom of Lake Nasser here, and it's not, so the soil is not a fertile soil. And so unfortunately, the agriculture hasn't improved. So at any rate, the dam was started in 1960. The construction of the dam was started in 1960. And what would eventually occur is that whole area would be flooded out. This was a map that was one of the slides in my dad's collection, and all of this darker area, the Nile is the little squiggly line, of course, going down there. And then all of the darker areas, those were the lands that were going to be flooded out. And all of these dots are ancient sites. Not only ancient, but I mean, you probably could have filled this whole area with dots because there are also historical sites all along the way. So my parents, and I'll get to this in a little bit, they weren't working in Egypt. They were working down here in the Sudan, right around the Second Cataract, where Wadi Halfa, the town of Wadi Halfa, was. The other thing that I'll also say is all of the pictures that you'll see, again, these were taken in 1963, 1964. Everything is underwater now, of all the pictures that you'll see. One of the biggest features that my dad did not work on this, but one of the largest features was Abu Simbel. It's a 13th century temple honoring Ramses II. It was going to be underwater. So this is a water view of it. You can see one part of it there and part of it there. And it was going to be submerged. And so it actually was disassembled piece by piece and reassembled further inland so that you can go today and actually still visit it. And it apparently has held up very well from being disassembled and reassembled. This is a closer up view of this. With this, because the Egyptians and the Sudanese, they knew that all of these areas were going to be destroyed. So they actually applied to UNESCO and to receive funding and help with all of the archaeology on this. So everything would be recorded. And so it was a massive undertaking that took place. There were 3 different phases. There was the 1963-64 excavations. And then the next one was, I believe, 65, 66, and then a final one in 67, 68, I believe. And so this was a massive excavation that went, that it was a huge undertaking. This is part of that excavation at Abu Simbel. More than 20 different countries actually participated in the variety of excavations through the 1960s. The Polish team was one. They worked directly on Abu Simbel. Other countries that participated, Great Britain, China, Yugoslavia, France, the United States had multiple different groups that went. So the group that my dad and mom went with was the University of Colorado. My dad received all 3 of his degrees, bachelor's, master's, and PhD from CU Boulder. And so that's how he got to be a part of it. So this was, and I do not know if they participated in the later excavations, but they were there at least in 63, 64. So where actually a lot, not just the CU, but a lot of the different countries were based out of was Wadi Halfa. And so again, that is just, it's about 20 miles south of the Egyptian Sudanese border. And then most of their work was right around the Second Cataract, a series of falls and rougher water. And again, it's the city of Wadi Halfa. And so Wadi Halfa, and actually it doesn't exist like this anymore because it's all underwater. They actually did build a new Wadi Halfa that you could visit, but obviously in a different location unless you have scuba gear. So these are pictures that my dad or somebody on the whole trip took of Wadi Halfa. It was roughly about 50,000 people that lived in this area, but my mom did predict that it wasn't in the town as we see it right here. She thinks that it was a series of there were a bunch of different little communities up and down the Nile. And so she thinks that the population number came from all those little villages that assembled together. So this is an aerial view flying in and just a few of the houses. My mom said she thought it was probably about 15 blocks wide, but long city. It was it sounds like quite the advanced city because it was the head of the government for the Northern Territory in Sudan. And so you had a Hilton that you could stay there. That's my dad. I know he wasn't staying at the Hilton, but they must have visited. Lots of government housing. You had the taxi stand and the railway office in Wadi Halfa. You also had a lot of access. It was literally right on the Nile. And so a lot of water access. My parents actually, they got to Wadi Halfa on a steamer boat. They took a steamer from Cairo down to Wadi Halfa. So it's on a boat, something like this, that they arrived there. There's an airport in Wadi Halfa, a railroad that was near Wadi Halfa, and some paved roads around Wadi Halfa. Again, the waterfront, very, very active transportation system via the water. Apparently the fishing out of Wadi Halfa was pretty big as well. So now the actual work that my dad did. This is my dad in 1963, 1964. He was invited to go to work on this by Dr. Robert Lister, who was an anthropologist at CU Boulder and one of my dad's professors. And so my dad had finished up, in fact, he was finishing his master's while he was in the Sudan. He, in the letters my mom wrote, they sent his master's thesis, which was on the Ute prehistory project. They sent it back to be published for publishing from Sudan, and I guess it turned out to be an absolute mess, but that's okay. So his job in Wadi Halfa was part of the CU group. He was a foreman, field foreman, and then he also was part of writing the ultimate report at the end of their time there. So he was one of my mom. There were two different letters. She said 25 people from CU. Another letter said 27. I don't know if that only included students at CU that were working, or staff members at CU that were working on this project, or families, because there were families that went too. So this is just a collage of some of the people from CU that were working on the project. I don't have, because the slides that Georgine, there were a lot of captions on the slides, but not all of them did. So I don't have a lot of information about the actual work that was done. I know my dad, he wrote a biography of my mom, and she, in that biography, he had that the sites that they would be working on were everything from 500,000 years old to present day, being 1963, 1964. As far as the work, it was all, well, I don't know. Sometimes some of the pictures, you can kind of see Wadi Halfa in the background, but I don't know how close they lived to actually where they were working. But one of the pictures I found, which I think is a really cool picture, and I know for a fact that this is my dad because I know how he stood, they actually had to take a boat to get to wherever they were working on this one. I'm assuming that they're carrying, you could see some of the boat masts in the background, and carrying some of their work tools and whatnot to the work site, I assume. The workers, they actually trained a lot of Sudanese. Most of their work crew was from the southern parts of Sudan. And so that was one of my dad's responsibilities, was to teach them how to do the actual archaeology and the surveying and the excavating. This is part of the work crew on the site. And I thought this because I grew up in this environment on many, many, many different sites, and I was one of the excavators and whatnot. And when I first looked at these pictures, I thought, well, those are really lousy pits. But then thinking about it, they're digging in sand. So how can you have nice, crisp, clean walls and whatnot for this? So one of the things, when this says seed group site, in some of my research that I did, different groups of people, they named them, instead of having names like the Nubians or whatnot, they named them like C group. There was C group, X group, A group. I can't remember all the different letters. I didn't find any information why they named them that, but yeah. So this is a C group site for whatever that means. This is an X group site. It's a Christian settlement and a Christian church that was, I assumed, nearby this. And again, this is near the Egyptian border, but still in the Sudan. Part of their work was, of course, once you have the artifacts, is analyzing them, cataloging them. And this is Florence Lister. She is the wife of Bob Lister, who led the CU Corps. And this is kind of fun because this is kind of the role that my mom took on in later years, where Florence, she was a kind of an expert in the field of ceramic analysis. And my mom, even though in her letter she never talked about working with Florence, my dad referenced that my mom worked with Florence. And so that is some of the earlier parts of my mom's career in anthropology. And then this is one of the other students from CU, Kathy Green, also working in the lab. So that's pretty much all the archaeology that, because I didn't have much information, but just the living there, because they were in Wadi Halfa for about 5.5 months. So this was a fairly long stay. And CU had a series of 3 different houses. There was a house for the bachelors, a house for the married people, which that include my mom and dad, and then a house for families, because there were families. I came across quite a few pictures of kids 4 or 5 years old that were there. So I mean, what a crazy, wonderful childhood that would have been. So this is a picture in front of the bachelor quarters, and I'm kind of thinking this is the street in front of there. I was looking at the doors and kind of the symbols on the doors, and I think this is the same door that is there. And I believe those are goats in the street playing, fighting. I'm not quite sure what they're doing. My mom said that they were lucky enough, the house for the married faculty, they actually had flooring. It wasn't dirt floors, and they had a cement patio. So it kind of sounds like they had the Hilton version of the whole setup. I'm guessing that this is the cement patio, and this is Gary Lister, the son of Florence and Bob Lister, that headed up the whole shebang. Then this is my dad. I'm assuming it was in the quarters that he and my mom lived in. So, and funny thing, this basket that looks like it's being used for trash, we used that as a trash can in my house growing up. So it continued its use. In the homes that they had, each home had a set of servants. And my mom, in her letter, she said, I hate to call them servants because that was far, far, far from what my mom's beliefs were. But by and large, it's what they were. They were all men. They had a cook, they had an assistant cook, they had a wash boy, and then they had a person who, I found the word suffragette, I believe that's how it's pronounced, somebody who waited on tables and cleaned their rooms. So these are just some of the pictures of the servants that worked in the house that my parents lived in. So Hassan was their cook, and Hassan, this I believe is Hassan. My mom wrote quite a bit about him because my parents, when they traveled, and that includes when we were growing up too, they always wanted the authentic experience. And so Hassan had cooked for the British Army during World War II. And so he actually spoke English. Each of the houses, one of the servants spoke English to help with the translation and whatnot. And Hassan was the English speaking person in the home. And he prepared meals for them in the English style, as my mom put it, because all in Hassan's eyes, all white people were English. And my parents asked and asked, would you please prepare some local kind of dishes? And my mom in her letter said that he would not, because those weren't proper for white people. So, but this was not in my mom's letters, but I grew up with the story of when they were living there that they had brains and scrambled eggs for breakfast. And my mom, they complimented the cook on this because they loved it. And then they ate brains and scrambled eggs for another month. And so that was the story growing up. And finally, they asked that if he would please prepare something else besides brains and eggs. They ate lots of locally grown vegetables and fruits, lots of goat, lots of lamb, and as my mom put it, some very poor quality beef. And then they were very excited because a couple of times they got tinned ham. And so they were able to get tinned ham. This is Hassan's family. My mom wrote that he had 2 wives, and he appeared to be rather well off in the community. He had 2 wives, too many kids to count, and lots of grandchildren too. So that was my mom's words. So when they weren't working, they were able to do a fair bit of exploration. And being in a Muslim country, they had Fridays off because that's the Muslim holy day. And so every Friday they had off. And apparently, I'm going to guess that CU actually bought a VW bus that they could, the whole crew could use to go off and explore. And I don't know if this is the hotel that my mom referenced in her letters, but she said that there was a hotel in Wadi Halfa run by an Italian that you could go and get a nice cold drink and sit in the gardens. And so I don't know if this is that hotel, but the caption on the slide said, CU Volksbus at hotel, so I'm going to guess. One of the things my mom said, since she was leading a life of leisure, as she said, since she wasn't cooking, cleaning, or doing anything else, she loved to go to the souk, which is a shopping center. And most of the shops in the souk were actually owned by Lebanese, Syrians, and Egyptians. Very, very few Sudanese actually owned any of these shops. And a lot of the items in the shops catered towards Europeans and Americans because there were so many in that area working on with the archaeological digs. So these are just some. This is Gary Lister at the lemonade shop. My mom talked about all the wonderful, wonderful fabrics that she believed were brought in from Lebanon and other countries in the Near East, and then basketry in this shop. They also had, these were the meat and vegetable souks. And so it was just a great place to go. My mom she referenced going there often, and there were a couple of Lebanese brothers that took a liking to my mom and Gary Lister, because my mom and Gary hung out a lot, and they would stop and have tea there. And she said it was never easy to get away because they loved to talk. These are just some of the streets that they walked. My mom talked about she would hear music coming from somewhere, and so she would just follow the music to see where it was coming from, and she would end up at a doorway. And many, many times she was invited in. She saw a wedding. She saw a whole ceremony for a baby that after 40 days, a baby would have, if it was a boy, would have 40 cups of water poured on it. If it was a girl, 39 cups of water. She saw local dances, just a little bit of everything. So she liked to investigate. The other thing my dad referenced was going to a lot of soccer games, that the Sudanese were big time soccer players. So again, just some more street scenes. Another thing, camel rides. Again, that's a great form of transportation when you're living in a desert. My mom was she grew up on a ranch in Wyoming and was a wonderful horseback rider. And so she actually organized some of these camel rides. Some relatives of one of the servants in the house, they had camels. And so my mom organized these camel rides. And in her words, she said that riding a camel bears little resemblance to riding a horse other than you are sitting on the back of a four-legged animal. So that's what she said. Then they would, again on Fridays on their day off, they would take off. You could see the CU VW bus down there. They would visit other expeditions, their sites on their day offs. They would also read books, relax on their day off. And then one of the things my mom mentioned too, as they were driving out in the desert, were the mirages. And in her words again, she said, the mirages were something to behold. Driving along on the desert, and then all of a sudden you think you are going to drive right into the ocean because the whole place looks like one huge body of water. There weren't any pictures of mirages, although I looked one up online and wow, yeah, it sure did. So just as Doug was referring to the play part of some of the excavations and big digs, this was a story that I heard many times, and I think I misspelled shard. I looked it up and it was spelled both ways. This is my dad, and this was Christmas 1963, and apparently they had quite a big party, and he ended up getting very intoxicated, and he was found, this is the sherd pile, he was found guarding the sherd pile, or at least that's what he told Bob Lister. And so an entire letter was written out complimenting him on his grand ability to guard the sherd pile, and then there was a beer bottle cap that was added to that, and that actually hung in the house for many years. I tried to find it. I don't know what I've done with that. That's my mom and Kathy Green. I don't know, the same Christmas party, playing the plates. I don't know what they're up to. Then finally, the souvenir that was brought back. One of the letters that my mom wrote, she kept on saying, I'm not going to bore you with all the details. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. Then came Charlie. And page after page after page after page describing Charlie. So Charlie was a puppy that the CU crew found abandoned in the desert. My mom in the letter said she thought that it was probably 3 or 4 days old. And so my dad brought it back to her, knowing her love of dogs. And my mom raised it, bottle fed it and whatnot, with intent of finding somebody to adopt it. Well, two things going on. One, everybody was going to be evacuated from Wadi Halfa because it was going to be flooded. And so who wants to take along a dog? Second thing, dogs weren't pets. They were pests more than pets. And so they ran stray on the streets. And so the end all was that if they couldn't find a home for it, and if they left Charlie, she would probably, well, not probably, she would have been killed, because one of the things, the government of the Sudan, they actually paid to have all the essential animals such as camels, donkeys, horses, goats, sheep. They paid for those to be relocated along with the people when Wadi Halfa was eventually flooded. But with dogs and cats, they were shot. That was one of the things that the police did, was go around and shoot them. So at any rate, my parents, they're, as my mom said, the most expensive souvenir, because they actually had to fly Charlie back. My parents were traveling when their time was up in Wadi Halfa. They were traveling through Europe. And so Charlie had to be flown back to the United States and stayed with an uncle of mine. And that in itself was quite the task to get Charlie back. And so a lot of money was paid. A lot of it sounds like in bribery to get this dog back to the United States. We had Charlie. I don't have any memories of her. I was probably about 2 years old when she died. So that is the most expensive souvenir. She was called a Baladi, which is just a street dog. And then those are my parents in Cairo at the end of their stay. So that's pretty much it, the talk. I do have a few more slides. Just, I don't have any stories about them, but I'll just quickly kind of go through the rest of the slides. This is the airstrip in Wadi Halfa. So imagine landing on that and then a whole herd of cattle. One thing my mom said, they basically had interaction mainly with men, very few women. And with the women, a lot of the more traditional women had tattooed, their lower lip was tattooed blue, and then they wore the black clothing and head coverings and whatnot. None of these slides were labeled as to what those are. This is their time in Egypt with the pyramids at Giza and whatnot. And that is it. Okay. Righty. Next.
Good job.
What do you think, Doug? Up to you. We're really running behind, folks. Yeah. Bob Mack is next. On Cypress. I guess it's up to everybody. People, it is 8:30. So go for it. Yeah. Okay. Point me to the goal post. Go for it. I would like you to advance so I can be out here and use and have my own laser here.
That doesn't work.
Pardon?
That doesn't work. People at home can't see the laser.
Yeah, cleaning, I can see it.
People at home can't see it.
Oh, okay.
But so what's best is for you to point from here. What was the name of your presentation?
Do what?
What was the name of your presentation?
Oh, same. Cypress.
There it is, Cypress. It must be it. Okay. So what we can do is you can point with your pointer and I'll try to follow with the mouse.
Let's see, it's not, I get most of it marked.
So
Do I have to wear these? Because my
Yes,
voice
so the
is
people
pretty-
at home can
okay,
hear you.
Zoom,
yeah,
Zoom.
Zoom,
Doesn't matter which side this goes on.
it's better on this side. We found that out earlier.
Okay. It's kind of high, but I guess this will get there. Okay, thank you. You can set me up. First of all, really quickly, I'd like to thank Doug and the whole gang. This has been one of the best. We've been members for, I think, 13 years at least, maybe more. This has been one of the best organizations I've ever been with, including some anthropology associations, believe me, in terms of a whole bunch of things. So thank you very much. And for the membership in general. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Mr. Little because he helped see me through a very nice seminar he helped me set up in here on Saturdays about 2 years ago on forensic and bones and that stuff. So thank you, all of you. I'm also going deaf pretty fast, or at least losing an awful lot of my hearing. So probably be no questions. And that probably will work out for everyone so they can go home and go to bed or whatever, go home and get a drink or whatever you do. So this was originally in 2019 that we spent, my wife and I, Donna, spent about 3-4 weeks in Limassol, Cyprus. And then after this thing was passed, we went to Portugal, which we really, really loved. Please. This is the director of the project, Dr. Zania, and my wife, Donna, on the right, Dr. Zania. And she is a Cypriot. She is a Cyprus original for many, many generations. What I'm doing here is, well, it's pretty clear. There's a division here that's owned and controlled by Turkey with that green line drawing the northern part. And we sure found a lot of protests, big signs and stuff in the southern part, which is where we were controlled. It's independent. They're independent, but they're much more closely tied to Greece. So it's Greek Cypriot controlled. You can see that this relationship of where it is in the far eastern Mediterranean has always been a target for major different groups of occupation. Oh my goodness. Well, hunters and gatherers settled it about 10,000 years ago, but it saw conquest by empire after empire, and a Turk, Alexander the Great conquered it. Just on and on. The British had control of it as a province for 1925 on, and we still found a lot of British influence and that sort of thing in it. Most people, like a lot of other places that I've lived and been, Donna and I traveled, the younger people all speak quite well in terms of the English tongue, please. So this is where, with the arrow showing where we spent most of our time in the southern part in Limassol. Next, thank you. And specifically in Limassol, looking at remains, all came from St. Nicholas Cemetery. You will notice at a cursory look, and it's so packed, you could hardly walk between graves at all. You'd have to kind of walk on top of part of the stones because the soil is limited. It's very rocky, the whole island, and people bury their dead in the 3, 4, 5 deep. The burials we have are about 200 to 300 years old. They're not much older than that often. But people are retaining them now and taking them out because they haven't paid the rent, so to speak. Basically, it's pretty expensive to maintain. And so people are taking them out very quickly. Many of the younger Greeks and the Cypriots have been pushing for getting burned, get the bodies burned, you know. And the Eastern Orthodox Church has been against it, but I just read about 6 months ago that it seems to have passed now, and the first crematoria is going to open by next fall, I think. So that'll help relieve some of this kind of pressure. Okay, please. This is Sania and I in the lab, which was on the cemetery grounds about 25 feet down. And we have probably close to 1,500, 2,000 skeletons now in there. Please. We were given, all of us, to study and work with. Some of those boxes you saw stacked, you get a box like this and you jumble mumble, but you'll notice that the plastic sacks are often related to all the foot bones, and there's a good reason for that if you try to order those in the right position, as well as wrist bones, or even in some ways more complicated. So we're given this and trying to put it together and learn from it, with a little help from my some graduate friends also that were over here to the side. There were some things that I helped get, had a little help on, particularly down here, not showing of foot bones. Please. So human skeleton remains, including teeth, which of recent times, teeth have become the bioarchaeologist or the osteologist's delight, because now the plaque and other things you get out of the teeth are pretty amazing, kind of like annual rings of growth, and you can get a lot of age stuff out of it, but also disease and health status. And in fact, yes, so we've been using that for quite a few years. Life history of the deceased, age, sex, those are some of the things you can quite clearly narrow down. Sometimes ancestry within a very broad category. There's so much of that is so complicated that many bioarcs don't even, or forensics even, kind of in Europe don't deal too much with it anymore. Health and disease, the dietary patterns, they show up on the kind of effects on the bone at different times. Also lifestyle and activity. I'm from Alaska, well, at least 31 years there full time, and we have a lot of bones from older times of people kayaking and throwing. You can tell handedness because of where the musculature attaches. It leaves little enthesiopathies, they're called, little places on the bone where those tendons got stronger and muscle were pulling on them like a weightlifter. You're going to get some kind of little ridges there and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of stuff you get out of it. Assorted traumas, some things cure and get reabsorbed totally, but some things last most of your lifetime. Some injuries that show up on bone. Violence, growth and development issues, whether you're getting certain kind of a poor diet, especially as a younger kid growing where your needs are so high, those are maintained to some extent in the teeth and in the bones. A guiding tenet is flesh always forgets, but bones remember. And in short, what I'm talking about is an osteobiography of a human skeleton. Please. This is just a couple examples I pulled out. Left femur head and the greater trochanter, which we feel when we go down our head. You think that's your hip, but it's not. It's the greater trochanter on the femur. And that's on the left side here. Severe arthritic destruction. You can see the head of the femur is becoming eroded, perhaps also some bacterial infection. Porosity, just tiny little holes that start developing, lack of proper nutrients and age. Possible fracture right here, apparent subsequent fracture on the neck of the femur, please. And now we have a left femur and a right. You can see some of the same things happening there. I won't dwell on that. This is a swelling in the far end, or the distal portion, we call it, of a bone infection, bacterial infection that lies just under that shiny covering. If you've ever butchered animals or anything, you find that slippery, shiny cover. That's the periosteum. Below that, and transmitted by the blood work, because bone is anything but dead. Just hit your shins once in a while, you'll see how that's a live tissue. Anyway, thank you, and we'll just move along. This is a part of a particular part of the skull, probably a case of scurvy. Scurvy shows up, of course, because of the shortage of vitamin C. Hence limeys back in the English sailors. And they didn't figure that out really. They just start sending limes along, and fruits and vegetables, and limes kept better in 1795 and began to change a lot of the outcomes. They didn't really understand what was producing it all. And but what we find now is vitamin C, we know so much about this, is critical. It's critical for bone formation because it leads to the incredible development of this collagen, this flexible part of a bone. But it also is connected to all the connective tissue, blood vessels, capillary walls, those kind of things. And so, in fact, sometimes red blood cells go haywire because the fragility of the membrane needs a certain amount of collagen in it. It needs vitamin C to produce that. Now, to prevent scurvy doesn't take very much vitamin C, but I think it's something like 10 to 15 milligrams a day, but it's not stored very much. And as many of you know, primates, guinea pigs, and a few varieties of bats are the only critters around that require an intake of vitamin C in the diet. Other animals produce it. They make these kind of chemical changes, biochemical changes, and make their own vitamin C. So this leads to capillary bleeding if you don't have enough collagen there to produce enough bone, and you start getting these little small kind of porosity holes in them. This is we thought of about a 7-year-old or 8-year-old boy. We didn't want to take skull shots very much, so I don't think I have a skull of this, but it also shows up in other parts of the bone. And you might remember pictures of scurvy. It starts out right away with the gums are bleeding, and a lot of times old wounds that you had reopen when you're in bad shape with this. And of course, where you see one vitamin, mineral, or nutrient deficiency to this extent, you're going to find comortalities or other stuff going on. So often this is doubled up with iron deficiency anemia, a number of other things, particularly because vitamin C is also important in the production of hemoglobin or red blood cells. Thank you. This is Dr. Zania, and she's just holding up a vertebrae. And we'll go again and get it closer up. Extreme osteoarthritis, including what we call
lipping. Well, that's pretty obvious, I guess. This is the, I got that. Yeah, right over, going down here, those osteophytes or bone spurs, we call, dipping down like that. And some of them kiss each other. So those are kissing osteophytes. Some are just lips, but when they match, we call those osteophytes, kissing osteophytes. Thank you. This again, identification, generally pretty highly accurate, is the sciatic notch. Narrow and deeper represents a male, and broader and less deep is female. And in this case, this is a male. Please, we're gonna roll. This is the front of the pelvis, where the two halves of our pelvis meet, called the pubic symphysis, or the pubic area, determining age. And if you look around, just run me around the inside of that white. Yeah, it's kind of roughened, see along the edge. So this is not a very young person. A young person, it's very rich and smooth, and there are no borders on there and that sort of thing. And as we get older, yeah, it's part of the game. You start getting roughened up and that sort of thing. Eventually, if you get to be living old enough, for most people, it gets to be claw-like, almost. Okay, please. This is a foot, and very complicated talus bone. You know, it's three-dimensional puzzles or more. Just we'll just cruise on. By contrast, this is skeleton remains from approximately a 1+ year old child, and remembering that babies, and this individual too, is pretty close to 300 bones versus an adult, which generally plus or minus some, 206 an adult. And of course, during growth and development, things fuse. If we go back to that, you can see how tiny those ribs are, and look at those vertebral bodies. They're all separated yet. They're not fused together into 3 or 4 parts, which I mean, into one part really, that we get later on. And look at those, you know, the small. It's very easy to lose those when you're excavating, of course. And a lot of people have just kind of put them in piles as all. Please. This is the hyoid bone, which watching CSI or something all over your life. Yeah, this is actually something you can palpate real easy on yourself. Just go below your mandible and push in there a little bit there. So that's the hyoid bone just above your voice box. And that fuses later. So it's sometimes useful to determine ages too, although it's certainly not 100%, because different people's age fuse at different times. Several horn, greater horn, there are different parts to all this. And then of course, people look at fracture, strangulation on that and that sort of thing. Okay. This was a case that I haven't seen very many. Spina bifida. It can be related to a folate deficiency or vitamin B9. Years back, it turns out it's somewhere in the late 90s, the US government specified that all cereals and number of foods that were common like that had to be fortified with folic acid, which is the supplemental form from folacin, which is rich in spinach and greens and a whole series of other things. Genetics, of course, so it's the usual suspects. It's congenital genetics. There's a great deal, fair amount of inheritance, but there's also this dietary sort of thing. And what it is the spina bifida, literally translated, of course, is split spine by fida, two. So split spine. And the failure of the neural arch to close, and in this case, in the sacrum, this can occur anywhere in the lower, most likely in the lower part of the lumbar, and often in the transition between the lumbar and the sacrum. And you can see this is not near as wide as some, Now, these people, this may or may not have led to a shorter life. It's probably not severe enough and probably was quite well enclosed in various kind of tissue covering it and that sort of thing. But in many cases, it does shorten life and infections and mobility, depending where it is. Some of these show up as hernia-like, where part of the spinal cord is on the outside. It's because it's so open there and it's like a little sac. It's nasty. Please. I just throw this in because there might have been one or two people in here that sat in my course I had here a couple years back where we talked about in forensics that the hardware in a femur that helps that hardware in modern states or cities, if you want to say, or countries, you get all these are recorded so that there are numbers here if you're looking to get a body, and you can trace down, and those are required to be traced to what lab it came from and the numbers. So that's one of the ways of identifying sometimes cases, forensic cases particularly. Please. And then finally, we had to cool off because it was over, what was done, over 100 in Fahrenheit degrees for days and days. And we would go out and look sometimes on the weekend at trying to see some sites, a lot of old sites there. But Donna would be in the shade waiting for me, and then I would be quickly joining her, and then we'd go get a beer or something. I'll tell you, hot. Something else, Donnie? Wanna? Thanks for your help. I think I got one more.
Oops, sorry. Where we were.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so that's our group that I was with that summer. And I'm obviously the oldest guy. The guy next to me is Israeli archaeologist. A lot of good talks when we had a little time, which wasn't much. The first three in the front are all Americans from New Jersey. I forget what the other ones are from. Oh, the one on the far right below me is from, well, let me see, Lebanon. Might have been Lebanon. And some of the other girls in the back, I know they're from Estonia. So people came from all over. It was a really neat experience. And they've been doing this now for about 7 years now. I think we have one, and that's it. So I thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
We have to adapt, right?
Thank you.
That's all right. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming.